All right, I think we can go ahead and get started here. Thank you to everyone for joining our Powell Software webinar on Beyond the Intranet, Digital Workplace Apps, Solutions, and Bots. My name is Nick Johnson. I'm the Marketing Manager for Powell Software US. Joining us today, we have the originator of this session, as well as the founder and CEO of our partner, Two to Lead, Canwall Kibble. We also have the technical lead and SharePoint expert for Powell Software, Juan Larios. Thank you both for joining us. And without further ado, I pass you guys the mic.
Thank you so much, Nick. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for jumping on this webinar and for hopefully those of you listening afterwards as well. We've got a lot to cover in terms of content and the things that you can do beyond the intranet. This session is really around recognizing that companies are starting to invest, teams are starting to invest into SharePoint, whether it's SharePoint 2019 on-prem, or hopefully you're moving and have hybrid scenarios where you're actually using SharePoint online. But at this time, you're starting to invest more and more into SharePoint. You've got some of the core functionality in place. And what you're really starting to look at is, okay, now that we've got our intranet in place, what's next? What do we do? So during this session, we're going to go through quite a few things. Obviously, digital workplace apps and some of the benefits there. We're going to be sharing some examples of solutions and benefits of bots as well. I'd encourage everyone on the webinar today. One of the benefits here is interaction attending this live, so really appreciate it. I encourage you to take advantage of by asking questions, and I'll do my best, whether it's ad hoc throughout the presentation, or we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for questions as well, to ask questions around how some of this could apply to you, or specific scenarios where you might need some guidance on how to prioritize what's next. So with that, just want a short intro that I want to share with you guys. I've been pretty blessed and pretty fortunate to work with some great partners and some great team members. I think in terms of my career, it spans a little bit over 15 years now, starting to get a little bit more gray in my beard. But I've been pretty fortunate with that to be recognized for some of my work around intranets. I've been able to write about responsive design. I've been blessed to speak at a lot of conferences and across US, Canada, and Europe as well. Just last week, I was speaking at Las Vegas conference, the SharePoint conference that was happening, where Microsoft shared a lot of great announcements and how those kind of interact. So this presentation includes quite a bit of that. I've also been an Office 365 MVP for a couple of years. If you're not aware of what an MVP is, essentially it means I'm spending, typically I try to, besides my day job of running a company, I spend a lot of personal time to share and encourage discussion outside in the community through organizing user groups, conferences, and attending and speaking as well. I'm based out of Toronto. It's a home for me. I've been here for almost 30 plus years, and yeah, if you ever want to reach out, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter as well. All right, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the key aspects here that I want to level set is that this is not about how do we set up an intranet. This is about what do you have in place today. So I want to just clarify today what you've got in place is an intranet that's being leveraged for your broader company, where everyone has a central place to go to and is able to access company content, is able to have quick access to tools, and also has the ability to kind of interact and communicate with their peers as well. And throughout your company intranet, there are links from a navigation point of view to divisions or departments. And if you're already leveraging SharePoint Online, you might already starting to integrate hub sites and Yammer groups as part of the conversations and the communication that's happening to try to bring divisions and departments together collectively. Each of those divisions, I'm hoping if you are leveraging hub sites, you've got some relationship set up, some association set up to related teams and groups and sites created for those where people can kind of collaborate and work on projects and very focused goals together. So this is what I'm hoping you have in place today. It's totally okay if you don't. The intent here again is to encourage that in order for you to start looking at what to do beyond the intranet, you've got to have an intranet in place. And you might not be completely happy with the success of the intranet. You're trying to look for ideas. You're at the right place. Going to definitely go through that with you. From an intranet strategy point of view, I think it's important also to recognize for many organizations, an intranet has kind of different perspectives and different areas that you invest into. Some of you have invested quite a bit into leadership messaging and are encouraging the leadership to be engaged on the intranet. You're also sharing a lot of events. That's awesome. That means you're kind of a little bit higher on the employee engagement kind of radar. I would also encourage you to look at finding ways to recognize people, finding ways to improve people search as well. And then, of course, if you just have a smaller intranet or you've had maturity in your intranet, that means some of the from a governance point of view, some of the tenets that you have from a foundational point of view, you have in place today. So from a flexible navigation perspective, your navigation today is powered by metadata, site structure, and search, kind of provides a combination of that. You've also got a solid IA that's driven by governance in place today as well. And then you're starting to leverage analytics quite a bit in some of your decision making around where to invest, where to actually invest into building custom software, leveraging products, and improving. You want to essentially get that foundation in place and improve up the ladder from an employee engagement point of view. So this I found a really good way to kind of speak to customers around, okay, what do you have in place today? So if you have an intranet today and there's some of these items here you can check off, great. And the items that you don't have checked off, make sure you start including them as part of your overall strategy. For today's seminar, for today's webinar here, what we're going to go through are four key things. We're going to go through, now that you've got an intranet in place, where should you continue investing? What are the small areas, small bursts of innovation that you can invest into to improve how employees engage? And then we're also going to look at, from an integration scenario, how you can actually encourage some of your champions, some of your citizen developers to get a little bit more engaged, involved into creating integration scenarios. We're going to look at conversation UI and how that can impact and improve the speed of response for a lot of employees. And then last but not least, we're also going to make sure we touch upon culture, because that's something that you need to continue investing into. All right, let's jump into continue investing. I think it's really, really key and really important that there's a lot of time investments. I've been part of a lot of intranet projects, probably over 200 intranets in the last 10, 15 years. And a lot of intranets, you invest so much time into that first day of the launch, right? We work so hard just to make sure we can get it off the ground and ready for that countdown when you're actually going to flip the switch and send out those messages and those emails and the exam posts and encourage everybody to go to the new intranet, right? You probably even got some merchandise you purchased, some branding discussions you've had to kind of name your intranet besides SharePoint or calling it the intranet, and you've kind of made it your own. So you've prepared for this, and that's awesome. But the question for you is going to be, well, now that's launched, what's next? What do we do after day zero? What happens at day one, right? It's really, really important to keep investing your time and keep investing in your team's ability to adapt on how employees are sharing feedback, because you've spent, hopefully not 6 months, you spent a lot shorter time to get an intranet up and running. You spent days or weeks to get it up and running. And now you're starting to get feedback from employees of what's working, what's not working. So I want to give you a few tips that I think would be helpful. And these are examples that have worked really well. So I want to give you a couple ideas, and then I'll give you some recommendations at the end. First and foremost, the key here is that you don't want to test. You don't want to test content without actually getting feedback from employees. So once you get feedback from employees, you want to set up different scenarios on your site and actually test those scenarios. So an example is on a team site, like for example HR, you might not be seeing a lot of engagement once HR site has been rolled out, and you'll see that through the site usage metrics that you see on the screen on your site settings and site usage page. And you'll notice that on average about 10 or 15 or 20 people are coming to the site on a monthly basis, and you want to try to increase that a little bit more, or at least the day-to-day count you want to increase a little bit more, because you want people to be aware of what's happening from an HR perspective. So one recommendation here is potentially to, as part of your reach out, as part of your adoption campaigns, when you're messaging out to employees that there's new news and new announcements, is to encourage them to go to the homepage. But for the homepage, go ahead and try out a different layout. So for maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, try out a different layout where the messages and the content are laid out and structured differently to try to see if people are more receptive to clicking on the content. They're willing to engage a little bit more, and see how that reception is. You'll get insights from the site usage page. You get insights from analytic tools. There's even client-side libraries available externally that you can add into your intranet to just see how people are clicking. So this is an example of a heat map where the red area, the hot area, is where actually people are clicking the most, and then where they stop clicking. So typically what we found in our research is that people go to a home page or any page and they see whatever is within scrolling distance, and they don't typically scroll down as much. About 10 or 15% of people scroll down. So you typically want to try to have your most important relevant content at the top, and how that information gets displayed, you have to kind of manage that. So that's a quick call out. Just make sure you test and don't necessarily guess whether things are working. Actually look at the data that's being shared and look at the data around how people are leveraging the tools, and then incorporate that. Next up, this is something that we feel a lot of customers that we talk to are not aware. Today, out of the box, SharePoint has the ability to follow sites. And in this day and age, one of the things that everyone's moving towards more and more is flatter hierarchy, flatter structure. So we're going away from subsites, and now we're moving towards site collections across the board. So as the sites become a lot flatter, you want to encourage people to bookmark those sites. And there's bookmarking capability within SharePoint Online. It's called follow. In your site header, you have the ability to follow sites. And in the SharePoint homepage, you have the ability to view what sites you're following, what sites you're not following, what are some of your recent sites, and have the ability to favorite those. Now, this experience, I'm not necessarily encouraging that this should be a huge message that you should encourage your users to go to the SharePoint homepage, but I think over time, you're going to see a lot of investments from Microsoft where they are going to improve this experience. The call out here really is around the ability to follow communities. If you're building custom solutions, it might be worthwhile to kind of visit the API that's available for following sites, and see if that's something you can leverage as well as part of your solution as well. It's something that we do quite a bit. Next up is themes. From a theme perspective, SharePoint Modern gives you some flexibility, not a lot. It is definitely a lot less than what it used to be on SharePoint on-prem, but the great thing here is that because of those limitations in SharePoint Online, Microsoft's made a lot of great investments into the user experience. So there's less and less of a need to customize each of the components and functionality or the web parts that are there. So when for your intranet have created themes, both of these screens that you see on the PowerPoint here, it's the same content, both on the left side and the right side. The only difference is the theme is different. So sometimes, depending on your culture, depending on your brand, depending on your users, different colors can evoke different emotions for employees. So encourage you to leverage themes as much as possible, apply them to your brand. And then, of course, take that a step beyond, not just for the out-of-the-box components. Some of these investments you've made into building custom components, take advantage of the themes that are there, but also take advantage of the theme tokens that have been that you've defined and set custom values for, custom colors for, and allow and encourage site owners to use those values and change how their components look and how their navigation looks. This is an example on the left-hand side of a navigation for a customer on the intranet, but when you go to a site, if you allow site owners to change their images or their theme, the navigation component also takes advantage of that as well. So that's a quick call out. If you're not aware already, with Powell 365, Powell Manager, you do have the ability to create site designs. So themes creation today still involves a little bit of development experience. It's very similar to scripting, but if you want to enable and encourage your site owners to create their own themes, you've got this great ability leveraging through a click interface. And it's a couple steps, very easy, where you can go and create the design, name your design, and then actually through approval or allowing your site owners to have that ability, getting it deployed to your tenant, and then allowing people to take advantage of that as part of the site design. So just want to give you a quick call out. If you're not already aware, Powell 365 and Powell Manager simplify a lot of that automation, a lot of that configuration customization through quick kind of a couple of clicks here and there. So that was a quick call out on themes. Another thing to mention also is that onboarding experiences are really important. Obviously, onboarding in general for an employee, when they start an organization, they start in a company, we invest so much time into that. HR gets involved, IT gets involved, and other teams get involved in terms of making sure that employee has access to all the right tools, has access to all the right information. And the challenge there, of course, is that what is the onboarding experience for the intranet? Typically, when you launch a new intranet, you have a social media campaign, adoption campaign to encourage people to go to that intranet. But after that, what happens then to new employees who are getting onboarded? Do they get a walkthrough of the intranet? Do they get the training or insight into how to use it effectively? What we found that's been really successful is creating these onboarding experiences for users where it's a custom, the first time somebody goes to your intranet, it kind of prompts them today to say, hey, welcome to your new intranet. It's a bit improved. And by the way, most recently, here's a tip that we recommend. And this is a quick mock-up of an example where you recommend to employees to make sure you use the follow feature. Here's this site today that you're not following. Go ahead and click this. It'll allow you to follow that site, and then now you can start using the intranet. So those onboarding experiences are not just great for launching a new intranet as you invest and build an onboarding experience, but also as you launch new features or you want to share tips with employees as they're using it throughout their kind of their life at the company. And of course, I think this is important also to call out, is that there are a lot of changes that are continuing to happen in SharePoint Online that have been really impactful in terms of usage and leveraging some of that functionality. But there's also been this kind of discussion that have happened in a lot of conferences. Looks like we're limited in terms of what customization we can make. So I want to just show you a quick example of an intranet that we just recently were proud of that we built. This intranet takes the company's brand and presents it in SharePoint Online. And a lot of the intranet components that were built here take advantage of what Microsoft is already investing into, from the SharePoint framework to the UX best practices that they're leveraging, and taking that and making custom components feel familiar to the user. So this page, as you scroll down, contains a combination of custom and out-of-the-box components, and they feel connected and they feel like they're not made by different companies. One is made by Microsoft and another is made by the company who designed this intranet. So just an example of saying, make sure you don't limit how your brand gets reflected into SharePoint Online. There are a lot of possibilities to improve that. Even if you look at some of the amazing stuff that Powell team is doing as well in terms of their designs, they're taking advantage of SharePoint functionality and best practices, and then building a great experience around that as well. So keep being inspired and keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible with SharePoint Online. Don't get necessarily, don't think that things are not going to change with Microsoft. They're continuing to invest and improve based on feedback and based on customer usage. Next up is SharePoint investments. From a SharePoint investments point of view, I think it's really important. A lot of organizations are investing into building custom components where there is a need. We're pretty fortunate to be part of the announcement of the general availability of the SharePoint framework 1.8. That framework today gives you a lot of great capabilities. One of the great capabilities is that you can actually take your custom components that you've built, those investments you've had, and translate them to other products as well, other products within Microsoft as well. So it's really important that one key takeaway I want to mention here is that as you build components and your intranet gets launched, that doesn't mean development should stop. Microsoft, almost on a quarterly basis, is releasing new updates to the SharePoint framework. Ensure that those custom solutions continue to get upgraded so that you reduce your technical debt. Even if there are no new features, keep improving and upgrading your solutions. It'll be a lot easier for you in the long run. It's something that we've learned quite a bit. So that same control that we had at the beginning, that was being displayed in SharePoint, and the settings component was on the right. You can take that same component and now add it. Once it's been upgraded to SharePoint Framework 1.8, you can actually add that to as a tab to Microsoft Teams as well. So this is just an example of what that could look like, and even the settings works in a similar fashion as well. So just want to share a quick call out. I think it's important to look at whether it's Powell 365, whether it's SharePoint components out of the box, or the custom components that you're leveraging. Make sure they are leveraging the latest technology. Make sure they are something that that you can use across your product suite. That'll be really, really important. So as part of this kind of continue investing section, just want to call out kind of my top 3 call outs here. Make sure based on feedback and reviewing analytics, for example, the site usage metrics, that you're testing different layouts and content so that you continue investing and evolving your intranet. Very important. Make sure you are encouraging personalization. Just because there are some restrictions today for SharePoint Online, a lot of companies are feeling that they're pushing back on users' needs, employees' needs for personalizing their intranet. So one quick example of that we talked about was leveraging theme tokens, so that allows hub site or site owners to personalize their spaces. And then last but not least, is invest into the platform. Invest into it and across the platform. So as you build components or invest into components for the SharePoint platform, Microsoft is going to continue to invest to make it easier for you to take those investments and take them across to other products like Microsoft Teams. So hope you got some great takeaways there. I'm going to switch up the speed a little bit here and kind of go a little bit faster, but I want to call out, and I think this is important for a level set, is integration. From an integration point of view, simple integration still matters today. And to be honest, I think in the past, one of the integrations when Microsoft Teams was introduced was, hey, it's a really good call out, whether it's in the left-hand navigation, to include a link to the Microsoft team from the SharePoint site that the team was working in. So this was an example of our HR site internally. It's a private group, and then we included a link before when Teams was just launched, called it Team Conversations, and that link opened up Microsoft Teams. It was a simple integration that helped users a lot to take advantage of both tools and be able to switch between those different tools. Continue doing that, and that means continue updating your navigation systems, continue encouraging users and site owners to add links to tools that make it easy for them within SharePoint or Microsoft Teams, so that they don't feel like they have to relearn or try to reinvent the wheel every time they have to go to a different experience. They have to have all these different windows open. Make it super easy. The great thing is, based on feedback, both from TwoLead and Powell 365 and just developers in general and customers as well, Microsoft continues to evolve those solutions. But until they don't have that out of the box, go ahead and have the intranet and have your sites be your own. So I just want to state that. I think a lot of times people get a little bit too cautious about making changes and just waiting for something to happen or Microsoft to push out a new update. Don't be, I guess the biggest call out here is don't fear failing, or don't fear making changes that might not follow best practices. Little changes and little integrations like this, it's okay to do, as if it improves how employees engage and how they take advantage of the technology and the apps that are available. I want to take a moment and just clarify. I think today or in the past, one of the things that's happened quite frequently is A lot of projects, whether they've come to Lee, Powell, or just companies taking them on internally, is that a lot of projects, typically people get that information and they go through a very waterfall process, right? You build a business case for it, you secure the budget in terms of the promise of value, then you analyze the system, the needs and the approach, you design the optimal solution, you document it, you wireframe it, you get approval from executives, and then you start building it, testing it, and you go all the way back, and eventually you get to that point where you get feedback. And most often, it's that even getting employee feedback and getting employees involved is a separate motion, or sometimes doesn't even happen until after the launch. And if employees have feedback, then generally what happens is, hey, in 3 years, when we do actually upgrade the intranet, or in a year or two, we'll go ahead and incorporate your feedback into the new release. And obviously this has been a challenge. I think a lot of people recognize that. Today, the reality is that if it's not companies that are doing this, if your company is already not moving towards being a little bit more iterative and a little bit more agile, then your competitors definitely are. The teams and the startups out there are definitely doing that. But the way to actually gain value from integration, and the way in terms of building solutions that are optimized as an MVP, like what's a critical need that we have, let's go ahead and build an MVP for it, and then actually iterate through the improvements. So in this case, we take a waterfall approach and make it very lean. We build a business case. We for sure still need to secure a budget on the promise of immediate value. And then we go through analyzing, designing based on the priority needs. We build that solution, we iterate through that solution, and then we go ahead and test it, and then go towards securing it. The great thing is that this helps get the solutions out to employees a lot quicker, and helps those integration scenarios and that delivery scenarios a lot, accelerates that quite a bit. So I think it's if it's not already clear, I'm sure for a lot of you, this is I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. The waterfall process, projects are generally too big, and if you don't leverage the agile process and get more users or solutions out to more users, then you're not going to get that value. So the key here is with the agile process is it's so much better to deliver the projects in bite-sized sections. So from a SharePoint perspective, if you've got your intranet and now there's feedback around, let's say, departmental site, go ahead and make a small project around the departmental site. As long as it's connected to the intranet in some way, go ahead and allow the HR side or the IT side or other sites to kind of evolve over time. Just a quick digression as well around the challenge here that we see from a IT implementation perspective, that we see with a lot of companies, is typically in the past when you've had SharePoint on-prem and you've had on-prem solutions, IT had a lot on their plate. So on the right-hand side is a visualization of all the things that are on IT's plate. They have a few products on their plate, including server upgrades, including implementation of solutions. They had to build full source code. They had to build web parts and features, event receivers, etc. And there was a lot on their plate. You have to be very, very well versed in SharePoint to build solutions that scaled effectively. That is starting to change, obviously. In this new modern world, one of the things that we're starting to see is development models have changed. A lot of the components now are getting built using client-side web parts and leveraging cloud services. So a lot of the plumbing, a lot of the infrastructure is already in place, and all we're trying to do now is take advantage of that. But since that model has changed from the SharePoint on-prem world to SharePoint online, a few years have passed, and since that time, IT has continued to build up this backlog of projects and solutions that need to be built. And this has created quite a bit of a challenge for a lot of companies that we're talking to. IT is trying to plan for projects and support implementation of intranets and any technology-based solutions. They're trying to base those, but they're backlogged for 2 to 3 years, sometimes as short as 6 months. So when employees provide feedback, they've got to now wait at least 6 months, a year, 2 or 3, until that gets implemented. And sometimes the request that they have is very simple, or it's very, very small integration scenarios. So if you're not aware, today, Microsoft has been sharing quite a bit of integration capability from Microsoft Teams to Microsoft Flow to Azure AD, Azure Logic Apps, and just allowing you to connect and integrate with hundreds and hundreds of applications almost seemingly out of the box, and making it very simple. So there's a huge kind of investment, huge kind of movement around citizen developers or enabling employees to create experiences themselves or create integration examples and solutions themselves. Now, these are not complicated integration scenarios. These are small integration scenarios that can be very quickly automated and involved. So when we look at all that backlog that we had, let's say we took all those smaller integration scenarios and moved them out from IT's workload, employees could take some of that workload on. They can now, it's not just IT who's doing all that work, all those integration scenarios that leverage Microsoft Flow and Microsoft Power Apps, as an example, your citizens, your employees can take that on. Your champions can take that on. IT can continue working on some of the more complex integration scenarios, but there's a huge benefit of leaning on your employees who are more comfortable with designing forms and building these workflow processes. So if you look at some of the integrations examples, for example, there's ways to connect to enterprise data sources. There's some syncing that you can do between different systems to make sure that, for example, we see a very common scenario where integration with an accounting system where instead of getting employees to go on invoice statuses, instead of getting them to go to accounting software, you can sync some of that accounting, the invoice status information to a SharePoint list, and then allow them to have a quick dashboard, a quick view of invoice status for their projects. A lot of scenarios that I'd love to kind of give you examples of. Maybe I'll give you a quick example here, and this is for an organization who's already enabled and encouraged employees to take advantage of Microsoft Flow and Power Apps. So I want you to meet Priya. Priya is our contributor. That means her primary task is to work with people. And she's been a great champion of technology. She's been one of the few that was not in IT or not in one of the, maybe she's in HR or maybe in the sales team, and she's now in charge of actually helping coordinate onboarding for new employees. She's actually kind of become that champion, the onboarding buddy for a lot of employees. So Priya wants to make sure that all departments involved and coordinated are aware of what needs to happen and that they can complete the onboarding. Now she has, because Priya is a little bit detail oriented and also she wants to keep improving, she has went ahead and built out or captured a repeatable process and automated a lot of the onboarding. So I'm going to give you an example of how Priya's onboarding process goes and how she's taking advantage of some of the Microsoft technology. So today she's got a SharePoint list that's an onboarding list, and in that onboarding list she has, as new employees get added, she or others can open up the new list view and then add forms, add information to that form to say, okay, Brian May, he's a regional sales manager, he's part of the sales department, and his supervisor is Robert De Niro. So she's went ahead and filled in some quick information, and then as part of that, generally what will happen is once she submits that information, an approval task actually gets sent to Brian's new manager. Her name is Alexa. Alexa confirms the new employee, make sure the information is correct, and then the process kicks off. So we take that information from a list, it goes via email using Microsoft Flow. Microsoft Flow says, hey, do you want to approve this request or do you want to reject it? You can, Alexa, her manager, his manager can decide approve or reject. Let's assume the process has been approved. Now that the process has been approved, what ends up happening through Microsoft Flow, through the web interface, is that a plan was created. A plan was created purely for Brian May's onboarding. So the new plan that was created was Brian May onboarding, and you'll notice the group here is private. Priya wants to make sure that there might be some question that Brian comes up with that might not be available more for a public audience, so she wants to make sure that group is private. Just so you're aware, in terms of the flow, I know today we're not necessarily going to do a demo of this, but the flow, the interface essentially is when a task is completed, this is one activity action that's been added. Another is scheduling a safety training. So immediately there's training that gets scheduled 7 days from now in Brian May's calendar. And then we update the onboarding task as well in the SharePoint list. And then we notify that the onboarding process has been completed. So it's a very quick flow that's been set up. And let's have a quick look at the planner. So Priya's taken typically what she used to do in like a SharePoint list or an Outlook or in OneNote or just on a binder, and she's moved that all to Planner. And what she's set up here for Brian May's onboarding, and this is part of a template, is there's a HR bucket created for Planner. There's an IT bucket and a property admin bucket. So as part of that onboarding, she's included some initial onboarding steps. But since Brian has access to this is something that she'll go through with him on day one. She's also going to encourage Brian to add any questions that he might have, where she can actually support him or assign this work to others as well. Given that this was a private group, Priya's included not just herself, Brian, but also HR, IT, and her manager as part of this as well. So the great thing is every now and then, Priya will open up that planner and just see how many tasks are remaining. Are there any late tasks that need my attention, or do I need to follow up to make sure Brian has a great onboarding experience? So it's a great use of using some of the standard connectors that are already available. Microsoft Flow has other examples as well, other connectors as well, I think over 250 easily that you can kind of connect to. The example that we went through was a very, very simple one where it connected to SharePoint and created that. But it really allowed Priya and Brian to have a kind of a workspace that they can just work on together. There wasn't necessarily a need to create a SharePoint site and upload documents and work through SharePoint lists. The interface of Planner was very easy for them to kind of work through, and then Priya was able to see that progress. So I hope that was a little bit helpful in terms of that process. And then I hope one of your biggest takeaways here also is that Microsoft Flow has quite a bit of ability to connect with most of the enterprise solutions and products that you have in place, including those that are external as well. We know a lot of companies that we work with as well, from a Salesforce or CRM perspective, integration with services like Workday, even marketing campaigns and automation of marketing messages internally and externally through MailChimp as well. So quite a bit is possible. I encourage you to look at that if you're not already looking at it today, and get your employees involved. Look out within your company for the Priyas that are shining out bright, and they're interested and passionate about technology and learning and trialing some of this stuff out on their own, or just want to be involved. I'll share one other example from an integration point of view. This is for another company that we worked with, where they had a donation matching program. They invested really well into charity and improving the lives of others as well. So for this company, you could, as an employee, if you make a donation between $50 to $1,000, all you had to do here was fill out the form, and as you listed the charity that you submitted to, included the donation receipt, when that got shared with the leadership or the HR team, they can look at if that is a charity that is part of their approved list of charities. They would match your donation as well. So if you gave $1,000 to a charity to save children who are starving, that company will then also invest $1,000 as well, and just double your investment. So it encouraged internally a lot of employees, to donate and help others out. The great thing here was that this had been so successful, but this was all built on InfoPath and on SharePoint on-prem, and they had migrated over to SharePoint Online. And this is one part of their transition that they didn't want to lose. It was so critical to employees, this simple donation matching program, and one of the reasons that they loved working there. So in this example, we basically took a look at that donation matching program and realized, it's a very simple form. There's some labels and some text, maybe some drop-down fields, relatively easy for anyone with knowledge from a development point of view or a power user point of view to recreate that donation matching program in Microsoft Power Apps. So here's a quick example of that form as it was completed and deployed without obviously the customer branding in there. But it was a very simple program that we leveraged Power Apps for. But the key thing here was that this Power App was not created by our team. We were actually on site with the customer to support them for like a one-day hackathon. And essentially we went on site and or remotely in some examples, and we worked with their champions, the Priyas of their company, to help onboard them onto Power Apps and build these simple forms. It allowed them to get a sense of how development happens, allowed them to create simple programs, simple scenarios, use Power Apps, use the tools that they already have in place, and get this out into production. Now, the form at the core, from an MVP perspective, did exactly that, what the InfoPath form did. It received some information, it was submitted to a SharePoint list, so the Power App did the same thing. So the fields, the employee created the fields, we hooked it up to a SharePoint list, it's submitted to a SharePoint list, and then that list had an alert that went to HR, who then reviewed that donation matching submission, and then made sure it was there as well. So it really created employees to be involved. And the key thing here was, at the end of the day, it was deployed to production. And the core functionality helped. Obviously, you know, the UI could be improved and tweaks, but now we've enabled them, the employees, to actually invest and grow and learn a little bit more. Every time we do these one-day hackathons, companies always come back and say, hey, can you come back on setting and just help us with a couple of hurdles that we might run into technically, but help our team build more of these. We want to do more of these. And I think the biggest takeaway for us was that this comfort in knowing that it does not need to be 100% polished, so that users and employees can start using it from a production point of view. So establishing one-day hackathons have helped us establish a culture of failure for employees, for companies, to embrace that and be accepting of it, and really improve them, the employees, to share feedback when things don't work, or even raise their hand to say, let me help. Those are, I think, some of the biggest takeaways. I hope you benefit a lot from the integration example that we talked about with PRIYA, and then also with one-day hackathons. Encourage you to do the same within your company as well. We're going to shift over to the next topic here, which is conversation UI. You know, I think it's really interesting. This is not just true 5 years ago, not just true 10 years ago, but even today, as we have millennials and Gen Y and new forms of communication that are happening, at the end of the day, we're all communicating together, right? Conversations are always happening. Some of the best conversations sometimes are remote through Microsoft Teams, or some of the best ones that are a conference when you're running into people just randomly, or you're kind of messaging each other, you're texting each other and interacting with them. Conversations are what are innate for us to improve communication and help build that connection together. So it's really important to recognize that conversations are need to become a central part of how we work. And a lot of times, I think, in the SharePoint space, when we talk about collaboration, we miss out that gap on communication. So hopefully you're investing on your side in Microsoft Teams for your intranet, and connecting with your intranet, as well as Yammer for encouraging people outside your core group that you work with on a day-to-day, encouraging posts in Yammer to enable others to answer and share some of those insights. Now, notifications, we've all gotten very comfortable, very familiar with notifications, where whether it's our mobile phone to the applications, we get notifications today on our devices, and we're used to this simple interface that with a single click, in this example, KLM flight, go ahead and click on check-in, you click on check-in, it does that one thing. It really simplifies the experience for a lot of people. And then, of course, in terms of the most adopted applications out there are applications like WhatsApp, SMS, and WeChat, simple text messaging. You know, today, to this day, my father, my dad continues to get, you know, my hand-me-downs, the phones, because I try to upgrade my phone every year. I'm just one of those crazies. But every time he gets a new phone, I set up email for him. And at the end of the day, he downloads some applications like Facebook, etc. But he still feels very comfortable, very relaxed with using WhatsApp and texting me. So regardless of the generation, regardless of where you are, regardless of how we work, we just find it a lot easier sometimes to send a quick message and interact directly with each other. The same is true on how you interact with applications and systems as well. So if you're not aware today, if you've got Office 365, out of the box, there is an Office 365 assistant. This is essentially a bot that Microsoft has for the tenant administrators. You could turn that bot on and then ask just simple questions to that bot. In this example, the simple question was, hey, how do I install Office? Okay, the bot will respond back saying, oh, looks like you want to install Office on a PC or Mac. You know, choose from below. I responded back with PC, and then it gave me that information. That's a very simple example, but it can streamline sometimes for a lot of employees. That's context switching, switching between different applications, opening up a browser, searching in Google or etc., and then trying to find that information. So bots can be a really great integrator, a really great accelerator to connecting to other systems. Another example of a bot that you have in place today is Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams has a bot called a Who bot. You can leverage it to tap into organizations and get information on experts internally and ask it questions and respond back with that as well. And of course, there are a lot of bots out there that can integrate. This is an example, quick example of a Hitmark bot where I can ask it hotel and airline recommendations and what it can recommend instead of having to leave my browser. So obviously the use case will depend on that. We'll go through a quick example here of where bots can be helpful and more importantly, kind of look at where simple interactions sometimes go a long way. So in this example, a lot of scenarios that you can look at internally where bots make a lot of sense is quick answers to questions from anywhere. So typically, if you're looking for quick answers, the recommendation generally is not to go to SharePoint. Typically, it's to go to Yammer. And when you want to ask a broader question around the organization, some policies in place, etc., you want to go and leverage that and ask those questions. And you're able to respond back and like conversations, view those conversations, etc. So that's just a quick tip for everyone. Let's go ahead and go through this scenario in terms of where we are. So let's meet Carrie. She's our connector. Carrie wants to provide a reservation for the resident lounge to an employee while they're away from her desk. So while she's away, she wants to provide that information. So Carrie needs to get additional information from the assistant manager, and Carrie needs to capture that employee information and close the sale. Carrie just finishing her shift, everyone. So she's leaving, she's come across a customer who asks about the rates for the conference rooms and roof lounge. So as she's planning a company event, this location seems to be like a perfect choice for her and her employees. So that's what she's trying to do. She just wants to meet or exceed her plan expectations. So a simple example of that is basically Carrie opens up the SharePoint app on her phone. Here she has access to her conference room information that's stored on a list, and she can sort that information by room, capacity, etc., and get that information for a large conference room, right? So perfect. She reaches out to her friend who shared that information. Customer is happy. All right, perfect. That's an easy one. She obviously finds a link for more information. She's able to see the room's availability, make that booking. Everything's good. Perfect. Next up is Ralph, our friend Ralph. Now he's asking about local laws. He's clearly a little bit thirsty, and he wants to know about whether local laws and restrictions, if there are any in place for serving alcohol at the event. So Carrie, being new to her role, she's not sure how to respond. So she opens up Yammer. She posts a question on the assistant manager's group, and then she asks that question. And then from there, she's able to get a quick response, quick reply, and she goes ahead and through her mobile device is able to update that information as well. Everyone's happy. That's a quick use of technology, not just SharePoint, but Yammer and your mobile app and device as you go anywhere. So as you kind of look at these examples, you're going to get benefits and scenarios where these quick prompts and quick examples are going to enable your teams to work a lot more efficiently and effectively. So for some of the folks that are in IT space today and the technology that are joining the webinar, great to have you on board. Be aware that bots are relatively straightforward. If you're not aware today, this is a very old stat, so we're getting pretty close to it. This is, I think, from a couple of years ago. Nearly 20% of companies have already deployed chatbots in the workplace, and anticipating about more than half to deploy. 57% will deploy by 2021. So in a couple of years, more than half of the organizations, if not yourself, your competitors as well, will be taking advantage of bots. So I encourage you to do that. There's a very simple way today to create bots. If you're wanting to learn a step-by-step, this link shows a quick way. It's, I think, 11 plus pages long. That shows you step-by-step how to create a bot. Very, very simple scenario. And I'll go through that very quickly here. Be aware it's in the slides and it will be available for later. So first and foremost, you want to build your knowledge base. This is a website, a service by Microsoft, qnamaker.ai. This is where you can actually source content. You can actually pull in content from an existing list or build it from scratch. And essentially what you have here is questions on the left-hand side. You can seed some answers on the right as well. The other recommendation I would have is once you've got that in place, in terms of, we look at Carrie's example, she's reaching out to Yammer as part of a group. This is an example of just internally what we've done. So we've got a group, Yammer, called To Lead Labs. In there, we can ask a question, any question to that bot or in that in that group, and the bot will immediately respond with a question as well, or with an answer if it has one. If it doesn't, then it'll go reach out as well. So quick insight into the flow and how it's been set up. There's a flow where you can go through connecting to Yammer, connecting to cognitive services, and then pulling that information and responding back into Yammer. I'm not going to go too much into technical detail, but if you are interested, feel free to reach out. Happy to walk you through this demo and do a little bit more deeper dive, or even show it to your team interactively. From then, there are going to be times where the bots don't necessarily, or the Q&A maker doesn't necessarily have all the answers. So we can check from a cognitive services point of view the confidence of that result. If we feel we're confident 70% or higher, go ahead and post that to the Yammer group with the response to say, hey, it looks like you're looking for HR policy around travel expenses. Here you go. But if the question doesn't articulate really well, and we're not clear what that is, and we check the confidence of that through cognitive services that is less than 70%, we can send that request out to HR for approval. So in this case, through Microsoft Flow, a quick approve or reject would say, here's the intended answer. Is this accurate? Yes, approve. If it's not the right answer, when you hit reject, you can actually provide the right answer as well. So there's a lot of ways, examples. A lot of companies typically are concerned around the responses when you create an HR bot, that the bot will respond incorrectly. You can test for that confidence and then include an approval step as well when the confidence is lower than what you anticipated. There are a lot of examples of bots that you can create internally. I think the goal here really is to improve the culture and improve employee engagement for your employees. So from simple examples of registering a sale and making it very simple to add that information to CRM, to giving traffic alerts or giving alerts around the weather nearby. Where you want to end up, where the ultimate goal is essentially that you just don't want to create an HR bot or a finance bot. You want to create multiple sources of content, multiple sources of information that the bot can leverage, and then allow employees to reach out to a single interface and get answers across the different subject matter experts. Intranets and bots are the direction to go. If you're investing into intranets today, make sure you've got bots in your framework. We've got a few minutes remaining. This is in no way intended why we only have a couple minutes left, but culture is probably the most important thing here. All these, from continuing investing into your intranet after day zero, integration scenarios that we looked at with Microsoft Flow and Power Apps, to conversation UIs, investing into bots. None of these will be successful or provide you ROI from your investments unless you don't invest in your culture. The reality is that today, as people are starting to take advantage of Office 365 internally, they've got Microsoft Teams, they've got Microsoft Yammer that they're taking advantage of. Hopefully over time, if not today, you're already seeing some examples of Flow being leveraged, and you're also starting to take advantage of Microsoft Power Apps as well. And of course, SharePoint is a big component. All these applications, you've got to work to increase that usage, that adoption of those tools and services, and make sure employees are getting a lot of value. Now, it can sometimes be challenging. I've seen this day in, day out from employees where they're not able to, they find it, switching applications becomes a little bit more difficult. So just want to give a quick shout out to Powell Hub. The team has done a great job with building an application that gives you access to all your applications from a single window. You have a lot of functionality, from company branding to personalization as well for those experiences. So make sure you're having a look at that. And you also have the ability to create bookmarks as well for some quick shortcuts to applications. I will say one thing for sure is that what you should be aware of at most as well is that as Microsoft is getting some insights from Office 365, a lot of that data is being captured and being surfaced up and being represented in a service, an application, and a product called Workplace Analytics. If you've got E3 license today, your organization, your users already have access to this. I encourage you heavily to look at this. If not, happy to set up a demo and walk you through this. But essentially, it takes all that usage patterns that you have and starts encouraging better behavior from not having too many meetings and encouraging employees to have more focus time, to increasing where employees should be investing their time. For example, a sales team member in your team, the sales team generally should be working with new accounts externally. So you can actually set metrics in workplace analytics to say, if the sales department is starting to communicate more than 30% of their communication through email and Outlook and Microsoft Teams and SharePoint is with internal staff, we should nudge the sales team back into being more externally focused, focusing more externally. So quite a bit there. Couple of takeaways I do want to share. Make sure you are aware of Microsoft Roadmap, roadmap.office.com. Quite a bit of information that's available to you. Your role today, if you're part of this webinar or you're listening afterwards as well, your role today is shifting to be more of the product manager. You're managing not just a product, you're managing platforms, you're doing quite a bit. The traditional model that you had where you had upgrades every 3 years happening on-prem, and you were able to manage all the upgrades. Now what you're actually doing is you're overseeing the evolution of Office 365 and making sure your employees are aware of it, making sure the users are aware of it. So I've got a couple of tips here for you to take away as part of culture. Number one is make sure you follow roadmap.office.com, learn about what Microsoft has in their roadmap and be aware of it. If you're not clear on it, raise your hand, reach out to Powell 365, to the lead. We'll give you some insights on how to prioritize some of your technology investments against potentially something that is going to be coming out of the box or is something that's going to be worthwhile for you to take advantage of. Make sure you follow the tech community, techcommunity.microsoft.com, blogs, the community, the product managers, Microsoft, they're all there. You can ask questions directly. Most of us are there as well. One other recommendation is that most, in the past, when we were in the on-prem world, a lot of solutions, a lot of upgrades were every 3 years. Now, what I would encourage you to do is just decrease that window a little bit, make every major release every 2 years instead. So look at your intranet every 2 years to see if it needs to be refreshed, redesigned, revisited. And then what you should try to also do is any features that are coming to you, make sure you're managing those on a kind of quarterly basis. So manage those releases and make sure that you prioritize them accordingly based on potentially, for example, every quarter. So I'll give you an example. And last tip here that I'm going to give you examples of is building a visual roadmap of your product features, of your intranet, etc. So this is a product roadmap. This is an old example of a customer's product roadmap. It aligns not just what the features employees wanted, for example, top navigation, hero header, footer, staff directory, employee spotlight, but it also highlighted Office 365 features as well. So make sure you're aware of those features because that can actually translate into what features you invest, what features you roll out, and which ones you hold back on because you're aware something on Microsoft's roadmap is coming very shortly. And then last but not least, make sure you do quite a bit of planning, not just for your intranet, but how your intranet connects to all the other organizational activities that the company is investing into, the other initiatives internally. It's essentially called a digital workplace. Mapping out all your technologies helps out. We've seen this continue to bring return on investment. The single screen, single idea of all the different projects that are happening across the different business objectives. We went through a lot. I know we've got a couple minutes remaining, but I just want to highlight, continue investing as much as possible. I think the key here is to invest effectively, right? Recognizing when out of the box functionality makes sense to take advantage of and when it makes sense to potentially override. The other thing I'll mention is that collaboration isn't easy. We all come from different walks of life. We've all got different experiences. And we are all changing as well. So continue encouraging feedback and encouraging people to share what's working for them, what's not working for them. Releasing an intranet day one doesn't mean necessarily your job is done. It just means that the work has just started. And then last tip here, just to wrap this up, engagement drives innovation, not just leadership engagement. Getting executive engagement is really critical to success of having intranet be successful, but it's also important to have engagement from champions, from the PRIYAs and the CARRIEs of the world, of your employee, of your organization, making sure they're investing and building solutions as well, and continue investing into evolving your intranet. And I think that's it. Just one last call out is if you're interested in learning more about intranets, we've got a free white paper, office365intranets.com. Encourage you to check that out. And thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I know we're right at time here as well, so happy to stay on to answer any questions if you've got, but if not, enjoy the rest of your week.
Awesome. Canwell, thank you again so much. To reiterate to everyone, we do have a follow-up email that will be sent out likely tomorrow that will include both the recording of today's session as well as the slide presentation that Canwell used. So thank you again for everyone that was in attendance. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to either myself or Canwell, and we will respond promptly. Other than that, thank you so much to everyone and have a great rest of your day.